All right, Powered by Iron Health Pod. Here we go. Before we jump into the specifics and introduce this man here, again, we want to reiterate what our purpose is for these pods. We're going to teach you what's going on in the clinic. We want you to get a front row seat, learn about our clinicians, learn about our staff, learn what we do and how we're helping change the healthcare facility. It's a big important thing. We want to change the way healthcare is seen, and I'm passionate about that, and I know you are as well. So let's get into it. This is JT.
What's up, everyone? How we doing?
When did you start with us?
This was I think August 2022 was full-time status, but before that I was working part-time. I think I started in June.
Okay.
So it's been a couple months now. Loving it.
Yeah.
Loving the one-on-one PT environment, coming from worked as an aide before PT school and all that, handling like 20, 25 patients just from, the other PTs that were there. In like, it was craziness. It was craziness. The PTs, they would have like anywhere from 2 to 4 patients an hour and just running around like chickens without a head. And the aides were just getting all the exercises, everything. They had to basically run through everything. And it was, you go through PT school and you learn that that's not right.
Yeah.
And I know when I started PT school that when I finished, I knew I was going to want to be in a one-on-one environment. And ironically, one of my lab instructors, she was working here at the time, and she floated the name Iron Health, mentioned you. And I have had that, I'm sure we'll get into the talk of visualization and just manifestation and all that. But I had that web page on my phone from that moment on, all through PT school, so I had it for years, basically, just not even actively trying to manifest anything, but just every time I would see it going from like one page to another, it would always be like the first one that was there. And here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
That's pretty wild. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's first time on camera, me hearing that too. That's cool. I love that.
No, it's really interesting. I got to give a shout out to my mom actually, because she's the one. I don't know if you ever heard of the Secret?
I have.
Yeah.
So we could definitely dive into that. I think that's something cool because I mean mindset is so important for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like, as a PT and you as an Iron Man, right? Is that the true definition?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think we can definitely dive into that because I'm all about that as well, mindset. And I'm reading Goggins' book right now, and that's just like makes me feel like, whoa, I'm weak. I got a weak mind. I'm gonna look for David Goggins and get some motivation.
That man is intense.
Oh yeah, he's a wild dude. But what's your backstory? Like, what led you to PT, or like really, what's your origin story? Like in the past, how did you come up and be like, I want to do that?
So I will preface this by saying I was not a strong student all throughout high school. Undergrad was party time. Like I went in, I was pretty like irresponsible, not really disciplined, didn't know how to study. So for me, my freshman and sophomore years of college were like making friends, going out, having a good time, and not really so much like hitting the books, learning, trying to like figure out what I wanted to do after college. So junior year kind of rolls around and I'm in an exercise science major, but I have no idea what I can do with that. I like muscles. I like to work out and just learning
bro
about
science.
Yeah. I was just total bro science. Yeah. But even with that, I didn't even have like, it's not like I was like really committed or passionate about that, like diving into that. I didn't know I was passionate about it until I had a class in Essentials of Strength and Conditioning with Dr. Stuka. And it was awesome. Learned about like how to do like clean and jerks, snatches, deadlifts, squats, and just breaking down the movements and trying to learn like how to do them the right way. And it was really interesting. And I loved that and was talking to he was the head guy at the time, but now he's somewhere else. But I was like, Dr. C, like, what can I do with this major? And he had outlined, and bear in mind, I didn't have the best of grades at this time.
Mm-hmm.
He had outlined, like the big step forward with the exercise science degree that most of the students, I went to Scranton, what they would do was they would take that and either go to PT school or PA school. So I didn't even know what PA was back then. I wasn't asking questions.
Yeah.
But, but I knew what PT was. One of my best friends, Chris, was already committed into the DPT seat. He did he had really good grades. He applied for the guaranteed seat as long as you kept like a 3.0
Okay.
GPA.
So it's like a joint degree program.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so once we graduated, he went right into it. But for me, I'm asking, Dr. C, and he's like, well, you can also do strength and conditioning, you can do athletic training and things like that. So I asked him about strength and conditioning, and that's really where I started to realize that that's something I wanted to get into, which was, for those who don't know, strength and conditioning is more so like working with athletes. You're working with, whether it's high school teams or college teams, you can even work on the professional level, and you're training them. You're setting up their programs, off season, pre-competition, competition, and so on and so forth. And it was really cool. But when I looked at it, the way that people got ahead in that field was they either went and got their master's in it, they got their CSCS, or I'm going to botch this, but I think it's their CSA or CSSC, or it's something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in any event, I needed to make sure that I was going to get one of those certifications, and to set myself apart, I knew I had to get some sort of extra education. So from my background, not really being a strong student, I knew that I had to kind of like get my butt into gear. So as a junior, I was making it a goal of mine to make sure that I graduated with at least a 3.0. And at the time, my cumulative GPA, I think, was like a 2.8. Like, It was not good. And my goal from that point forward, from junior year to the end of senior year, was to hit a 3.0 cumulative. And that semester, I hit President's List on it. I think I ended the semester with like a 3.8 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, hey, this is actually pretty attainable if I actually set my mind to it. I sit down, I cut out the BS, I stop, hanging out with friends when I have other friends who were responsible, and they were going to the library and studying and things like that. I'm like, you know what? Let me start asking them how, or when they're going to the library, when they're studying. So I started to do that, and then little by little, it just kind of snowballed, and I was just naturally going to the library, studying, realizing that if I actually read the material, the exams were kind of easy, and then it made it a little more enjoyable. So started to do that, graduated with a 3.0, which I was proud of. And then I went to Hofstra for my grad degree in sports science, did that. I ended up getting a scholarship there, which was pretty crazy from, my standpoint. I was not a good student.
Yeah.
And I get there, and Dr. Jamie Gigarelli, I believe is still there, awesome guy. And he was probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my entire life, but had this totally laid back, respectful manner about him that really made you open up. And he would always say, call me Jamie. Like, he wanted to be, we're peers in this environment type of thing. But you knew deep down, this guy is really freaking smart. And he believed in me, and he would help me, with courses. He would help me get a leg into, like, I did an internship at Hofstra, and I was working with the men's teams and women's teams there, and I was loving it. At the time too, I was working part-time as a personal trainer / strength coach, because at this time now I had my CSCS. And
so you were just to get a timeline, you were getting, what was that degree? So this wasn't a PT yet.
Right. So
okay.
I graduated Scranton 2015 with an exercise science degree, bachelor's. And then I got my CSCS almost immediately after that. And then started the master's degree that December. So graduated May of 2015, started the program December 2015. And then I finished my grad degree December of 2016.
Okay.
So it took me kind of like a full calendar year, so to speak. I went from December to December.
What was that grad degree in?
That was in sports science.
Sports science.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the idea with that degree was you could go two routes. You could either go the strength and conditioning route, or you can go the research route, where you're still working with athletes and exercise and all that, but you're doing research. So I didn't have any interest in that. I wanted to be kind of hands-on, working with athletes and doing the training aspect because that was what I loved personally. So I did that. During my internship, I kind of realized that, wow, like my supervisor at the time, he was working really hard and he was waking up at 4 a.m. We were getting to the gym for 5 a.m. lifts. And then I only had to be there for, I think it was like 4 or 5 hours, if I'm remembering that. And then I went to work. But he would stay there from basically 5 a.m. to 6, 7 p.m. some days, and with interspersed gaps in between. And at the time, he had a little kid, newborn, and another one on the way. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, you know what? He must be making like decent amount of money. Like he's living in Long Island, and doing very well for himself. But I was completely wrong. Like he was not really. He was getting by. I don't mean to say it like he was struggling, but for me to see like how much work he was putting into what he was doing and not really being like compensated the way that I thought that strength and conditioning coaches would be compensated, it kind of like showed something in me that I'm like, man, like to hear number one, job security wise is not really that great there because you're kind of tied with some of the head coaches, and if the head coach gets fired because they had a bad season, you're out.
Yep.
And there's just that whole kind of, from top down approach, you're kind of at the bottom. So if whoever is above you gets fired, then you're just naturally gone. So I didn't like that aspect of it. And then there was also the moments where you had an athlete that came in that, hey, JT, like my shoulder's really killing me today. I reached overhead, hurts. I don't know what's going on. Anything you can give me. And I would be like blank stare and wouldn't know what to do. And it bothered me. So those two things kind of led me to take a look at myself and be like, is there anything more that I can do? And when I asked my supervisor, is there anything that we can do to help with the shoulders? Like, how'd you learn what to do to prevent injuries, to rehab injuries? And he, because he was a hard worker, he would look into the research a lot and he would read books and all this. And for me, I was just getting into that. I was just getting into, hey, if I apply myself to read and learn, I will actually get better at handling problems. So it wasn't as easy of a transition for me as it was for the head strength coach there to just like keep learning. But when I was kind of in that crossroads, I'm like, is there anything more that I can do with my now current degree? Like I've got a master's degree. Maybe I can like take that and go into PT. And the place I was working at part-time was a half and half. So it was a half athletic facility and a half PT clinic.
Okay.
So they allowed me to get observation hours working as an aide, and it was very helpful. And I'm like, you know what? I think like I want to do this. This sounds like the right thing. And then that was it. Applied to PT school. Didn't get in the first year because I was just throwing darts at a wall, and just hoping something was going to stick. Oh, I've got a master's degree. They'll take me. But I was way off the mark on some of the GPA requirements for the classes you really need them in, like chemistry. Candidly, like I had failed it my freshman year of college, and then when I took it over again, I had like a C or C plus, and no school is really going to take you if you just across the board. All of those major foundational science classes are in the C range, and I had a lot of them. So I had to go to community college and re-up those classes, turn those C's to A's, and then reapplied the following year, and then ended up getting into New York Med, which we have in common.
That's pretty wild. That's a story of like resilience, which is really cool because a lot of people would hit those barriers and just be like, nah, screw it. I'm just gonna go back to being a strength coach. And in your story, I'm curious, in the college years, what flipped your switch to know that like, hey, I can change this? Because people do this all day long, right? They just go through the motions and they're like, oh, whatever, I'll be fine when I graduate. Like you actually must have had a moment that said something needs to change. Like, do you remember that specifically, or was it just through osmosis?
For me, once I found out that I knew back then, quote unquote, I knew I wanted to do strength and conditioning, and then realizing that I needed to get a grad degree if I wanted to kind of be at like a leg up. That was eye-opening for me because I couldn't just graduate undergrad, get a CSCS, and then be able to just, get straight into working with athletes and stuff like that as easily as I would have been able to with, getting a grad degree.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that moment because then I was like, oh wow, like I don't have the grades to get into a grad degree. Like I need to make sure that I'm working harder to get those grades and then be able to apply. So it's really that moment.
Okay. I mean, that's solid. You pretty much in essence set a goal and we're like, all right, I need to go after it. If you had to go back, what would you tell your freshman year self?
Yeah. It's really funny. I think about this all the time because I kind of look back and I almost like wouldn't change much outside of like me just trying to kick myself in the butt, just being like, dude, you gotta like get your crap together, like you gotta actually sit down and put in the hard work to like do things in life. I was not disciplined. I was, not really responsible, from an academic standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably the only thing, people, my friend Chris, who he knew I want to do PT. I've already got a guaranteed seat in the DPT school. So he knew right away, and he came out of school. I think he was 24, and he's been a PT ever since.
Yeah.
And I look at that, and he, I'm starting as a PT now. I graduated and I was 29. Mm-hmm. So he's got, how many years is that, right? Like it's quick math. I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 years. Yeah. So he's got a leg up on me there, and that's like something that I wish that I knew. But when I've had the conversation with him about this and we kind of talk shop on PT and like strength and conditioning, he has said to me that he is not as well versed in some of like the exercises. And like, if he were to have to work in like a group setting, working with a team, that would be completely foreign to him. So I have that as like a backup. And I learned so much from my grad degree, and just, I have like a lot of connections with Jamie, Dr. G, that's still at Hofstra. And I don't know. I've thought about it a lot, like from the standpoint of like, did I ever feel like I was wasting time getting to PT school? 100%. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I look back on that, and it was my experiences that actually like lifted me to want to do PT, and that had helped me get into PT school and then get a job.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's, everyone's journey is different. It's just an interesting thing because I'm more like your friend Chris, like where I knew I wanted to be a PT right away, and my head was down, and I'm sure I missed out on other things because I was so hyper focused, right? So it's just like your journey really dictates who you are. So you wouldn't have liked the profession as much if you knew. But the big reason why I asked that question too is like, let's take PT out of the equation, and you have a kid going to college. And like their freshman year, their first time away from their parents, like what's the advice you give them? Like I had a friend who like had a 1.8 his first year, and I'm like, dude, you're not going to bounce back from that, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because the advice is to like try to become a little bit more disciplined and responsible. And I feel like you don't just wake up one day and then boom, like if someone's telling you that, it's different than when you yourself come to the realization of that. So if my future self came back to me freshman year, I don't know if I would have listened.
Yeah.
I probably would have, hey, you know what? It seems like he's doing okay anyways. Like I'll just keep riding this out. But I've had serious conversations with people who were in their senior year of high school, not knowing what they wanted to do, and were embarrassed with the fact of thinking of going to community college and taking classes there for a year or two. And in my eyes, some of the best teachers I had were when I went back to community college in between my years of grad school and trying to get into PT school. And I was taking the science classes over. Some of the best teachers I had was at Westchester Community College.
Wow.
And I looked at that, and number one, you're saving a boatload of money.
For sure.
But number two, like it's it's not as serious. And so, well, I shouldn't say it that way. You have extra time on your hands, so you can go and learn. You're trying to build your GPA up, but then you also have time on your hands to get a part-time job, make a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
That in turn is going to instill in you a little bit more responsibility. You have to be more on top of your shit.
Time management.
To be able to juggle those things that are going on, whether it's, you got school, then you go and you work at Starbucks, like whatever it is, it just is going to help you become more of a mature and responsible person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is going to help you become more disciplined because you have to set that time aside to be able to handle everything. And I remember talking to athletes from prior times in high school and stuff, like when I was working side gigs, and there was that stigma of community college, but I tried to wash that away.
Yeah.
And my parents even tried to wash that away from me too when I was in graduating high school and not really thinking of knowing what I wanted to do. But it was a quick conversation, and I loved Scranton when I visited it, so I just went there anyways. But so I don't know. I think it's hard with the way that the school system is set up in our country, where right after high school you got to go to college. And I know that a lot of people talk about the alternative is to learn a trade, but you don't even really learn that in high school, that's an option.
Mm-hmm.
So all you're thinking is just going to college, or you're a dropout,
Yeah, you're probably right. There's definitely a stigma associated with that. Like, if you're not doing anything after high school, you're a failure.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily the truth.
Right.
I feel like for me, like, a couple of the best people I've ever met in my life, or the most well cultured, are the people who've like skipped years, whether it's like going to college or skipped years after college, and they traveled and they like learned different cultures, and they brought a different perspective to life.
Yep.
So it's like a whole nother side that we just don't talk about in society, really, right?
Yeah.
And that is a scary thing.
And those jobs, they're good jobs.
Oh yeah.
Plumbing, electrician, mechanics, like they're making good money. They're making a good living for themselves.
Yeah.
And you just don't learn about it.
I sometimes say if I was in a PT, I'd be an electrician.
Really?
Yeah. Because I wouldn't have gone to college. I would have went right into work, and I've always been entrepreneurial, right? So talk about your friend. He was out of PT school when he was 24. If I started a business when I was 18, where would you be now? It's just like, in retrospect, I love what I do. I love the profession, but it's also in those professions too, which is another debate, is you have an electrician, they come in, they give you a bill, you have no problem paying. In the medical field, it's also that there's an association that insurance pays for medical, which is kind of like a whole nother animal to capture, when you're like, no, listen, if you want quality care, you might have to actually pay for it. Like, this is the way it goes. So with that, what's your thoughts on the DPT degree? And what do you think? They proposed this whole vision, DPT, I think it was 2020. I mean, we're past that now. So what's your beliefs on that, and where do you see the profession as a whole going with that?
I mean, I think it's a step up, where we're doctors now, for the most part. A lot of other PTs get grandfathered in with master's degrees and bachelor's degrees. That's great. But now, adding the DPT to your name and having that doctor in front of your name, I feel like also kind of gives you a little bit more like authority, so to speak. Like, I've seen it in here a couple of times where their eyes kind of like open up and they're like, wow, you got a doctorate out of it? Like, oh wow, I should be calling you doctor. And which to me is like so silly. I'm like, I'm not, sure, I have a doctorate, but you don't have to call me Dr. JT or something, like it just sounds so funny to me. But
why does it sound funny though?
Because I guess, I don't know. I really don't know. It just seems so like, I mean, I'm just JT, like, I don't know if it's like a humbling thing, but to me, like, I mean, I worked extremely hard for when I was in PT school. I ended up having, I was top in my class, got awards and honor society and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I was like, okay, cool. Like, I've got a PT degree. I'm still JT. And now I got to focus on the license exam and get that taken care of. And there's always just like something else. Like, I wasn't satisfied with being Dr. JT. And, to me, it's a great thing to have, and all the respect to everyone, all the other PTs, and if they prefer to be, Dr. So and so, then that's up to them. But I think in a large part for myself, the reason why I kind of feel that way is because when I went to grad school and I had Dr. Gigarelli show me the school, he came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm Jamie," and to be honest, when he showed me the school, I had no idea that he was who he was.
Yeah.
And then he's showing me around. It's a one-on-one type of thing. I didn't even know we were on an interview. And he's showing me the tour of the school. And then we sit down in his office and I see right across the board, director of the program. And I'm like, holy cow. Like, I had no idea. Dr. Jamie Gigarelli. And he's just telling me he's Jamie.
Yeah.
I'm like, I almost like respected him more because he respected me in thinking that we were peers, And at the end of the day, like, everyone's human. So we're all kind of peers. We're all going through the same thing. We're just trying to, like, survive in a sense, but also, thrive. I
asked that question because I go back and forth with it, where it's like, should we own up to that doctor title? Because sometimes I think a lot of the hesitation, and I'm not saying that's what it is with you, but a lot of the hesitation is that MDs don't like that we call ourselves doctors, and it almost becomes like a pecking order. I don't know. Don't hold me to that. But it's something that I go back and forth in my mind. I'm like, if that's the caliber that we want to be at, it's almost our duty to try to live to that standard.
Yeah.
And not saying like, hey, call me Joe still, but it's like we should still have a presence about that people should know that is still what we have to do because we earned it in essence, and we do know so much more about anatomy, physiology than any regular practitioner. So it's an interesting concept, and it's, you have more schooling, you have more student debt, and to eventually advance the profession, in my mind, we have to be seen as the experts, because what's going to happen, the sad, ugly truth is insurance companies will not increase revenue for PTs, no matter if they're a doctorate, a super doc, it doesn't matter, so like where does that line happen, and that's kind of where I go back and forth in my head.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. For your career in athletics, you obviously were into it for a while.
Yep.
When did you start? Like, what was your athletic journey? Like, high school, did you do sports? When did you start getting into like Ironmans? Let's go with that path.
Yeah, cool. High school, really, from like a organized standpoint, I only played sports my freshman year of high school. I did track and I did basketball.
Okay.
And then the rest was kind of like, I guess, unorganized sports. I was playing like in rec leagues from sophomore year to senior year for
like
basketball. Intramurals, yep. Prior to that, I was in AAU leagues and all that stuff. I love basketball, sports in general, really. Yeah. But then, I've always loved watching sports, playing sports, and it just kind of snowballed into that. And in between all of that, I was working out, just trying to figure out, the classic bodybuilding style, one, chest day, like
Arnold, Arnold was like,
exactly. Yeah.
Arnold was the guy back then.
Which is crazy. Yeah, it's really funny. And when I started, I didn't even know any of that, because I was just working out just because I realized the gym was a thing, and I wanted to, build some muscle because I was talking to girls, and I want to make sure, I want my arms to look good. And all that. It all started with all that. Like, truth be told, it all started with all of that.
Well, any young high school boy, I think.
That was my downfall, man. Like that's where I was so focused on trying to schmooze the ladies that I didn't care what was going on in science class and chemistry. It didn't matter. But yeah, in all seriousness though, I was still on basically a fitness journey, just trying to like figure out what I like to do, and learning new exercises and hitting machines and all that type of stuff. But I wasn't even really on like a structured program. It was just kind of like, hey, today will be chest day, tomorrow's legs, Wednesday's back, and that in and of itself is kind of a program. But there was nothing. I would just walk into the gym and be like, maybe I'll do 3 sets of 10 for bench press, and then maybe after that I'll do. There was no structure to it.
Yeah.
And then when I got to college, I made like a small little program as part of one of my junior year classes. So even freshman and sophomore year, I didn't have like structure in my program. And then junior year, I was taking Essentials to Strength and Conditioning. One of our projects was to make a program. So I'm like, you know what? If I'm making this, I might as well follow it. And then that was what I did.
That's pretty cool.
I did that, and then learned a little bit more in grad school, and now not just for me, but like for a team, and how to structure around the periodization and all that, how to structure around competition and sport. And if I'm gonna admit, something, it's that even still, there's a lot that I could learn about that. I feel like with PT school and everything, I'm almost a little bit removed from that, and knowing that I love that still, it's taken me to dig into it a little bit more and just try to like sharpen the axe, so to speak, so that I have like a double blade axe where the PT side is on one and then the strength and conditioning side is on the other. But it's a lot of work, because me as a new grad from PT school, I'm still trying to get my feet under myself here, and just trying to still learn as much as I can to be a really solid, well-rounded PT.
Yeah. As you should.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's like I never want to get satisfied with being content where I'm at. So that's where I'm at. And, I've taken a couple courses now where the strength and conditioning elements are tied into them. So that's awesome, because now I'm getting a little bit of both worlds that are mixed in. And that, honestly, when I started PT school, that was my whole goal, was like I wanted to have this marriage of strength and conditioning and PT. And when you're working with athletes, that's kind of the name of the game, especially ones who are going through an injury. It's okay, let's get them through the rehab process so that they're able to now get back into the performance side of things.
For sure.
So I think some PTs, they know the rehab aspect really well, but then they don't know what's the next step. And that, I think, is where I want to be able to really create that bridge and just be competent on both ends, so that I know once we're done here, this is where we start to get that performance level back to being able to play sports at the level that you were at, maybe even a little bit better. Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's really where that'll.
And that's like so that's like your biggest passion is focusing on that.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I say it a lot. I have a couple of private clients outside of working here, and I joke with them in saying it, but I'm being serious that we're going to train like athletes.
Yeah.
One of my clinicals, I was out in Arizona. You know this. I was working at Exos, which was a sick experience. But that was basically their mantra. It was like, we're just going to train like athletes. And you yourself should also do it, because athletic movements are just real life movements, just done at higher speeds and at higher demands. So if you're able to do that, work at those higher speeds, higher demands, then the rest of your daily life is going to be so much easier.
For sure.
You're not going to be as injured as much. You're not going to, the things are just going to be more efficient and easier to do. So with my private clients, and even sometimes with patients in here, I say, we're going to train like athletes. Like, I'm giving them coordinated and complicated movements to do, because if they can do those, then I clap and I say, hey, I've had professional athletes do this when I was out in Arizona, and you're doing this right now. Sometimes I feel really good about it. And it didn't hurt, and it took a lot of effort, but it wasn't hard, And I think a lot of people who are, you got to get them over that pain thing first. Once they're done with pain, you got to still build their muscle, their strength and everything like that. Once they get beyond that stage, then you start to show them like what they're capable of when they're not experiencing pain. And wow, if I'm doing this, I'm gonna prevent getting pain in the future. Like it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Double-edged blade.
How do you define athlete then? Like, what in your mind, what is an athlete?
Man, I don't know. I've never actually thought of that, but I guess I would probably stick to like the traditional side of things, where it's like an athlete is somebody who is working at higher speeds, higher demands, and for some sort of competition or goal in mind. So if you're in the gym, you're training to do some sort of powerlifting competition. If you're playing in sport, you're playing, you're building to play soccer or basketball. And I think it just all stems from the side of things where athletes take on more demands, they take on more speed and more power. So I try to use those foundational elements that, in my eyes, kind of term what an athlete requires, and then transform them into PT, so to speak.
Okay, I like it. What got you into the Ironman then?
Yeah, so my uncle Will, it's really crazy. I almost went to, I know this is going to be a sidebar, but I almost did PTA school.
Okay.
And the reason was because at by age 30, I had this financial goal in mind. And if I started, so I was 26 at the time when I was, trying to decide PTA or PT. And I didn't get in the first year of PT school. I knew that I could get into PTA school because I knew someone who knew someone, basically. And they were like, dude, just let me know and you're in. So I knew that I could get that. And I'm sitting around at a dinner table. My Uncle Will is sitting there. And we're talking about, this financial goal that I had in my mind. It was something silly. It was like to make like $50,000, have that be like a base salary. And I'm like, if I start PTA, I can get to that by the time I'm 30. And he's like, let me ask you a question. Is is that the whole reason? Like, is it just that? And I was like, yeah, kind of. He's like, do you plan on being 30 years old? And I was like, well, yeah, obviously. And he's like, by the time you're 30, would you rather be a PT or a PTA? And I was like, well, I'd rather be a PT. And he's like, I think you just made your decision for yourself. Like, forget about that, the financial goal. That'll come.
Yeah.
Go for it. So he's been a big inspiring piece in my life. And he was the first one that I had known that had done an Ironman. I had no idea that an Ironman was a thing. And my uncle was, he was speed walking the Ironmans because he was arthritic in both knees. I think his first Ironman was like when he was maybe 49 or 50 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And my uncle, he did college sports at Fordham. He was playing baseball. But he wasn't like some gym rat going into the gym and, doing, chest day, all that stuff. He would go and he would bike. He would do the elliptical. He would, he's staying active. But I hope he's not watching this, but I think he would definitely go through those dry spouts where you're like, Uncle Will's gaining a little bit of weight and he's not training right now, but then he would kick it into gear and then he would, shred that weight and would start to just really get intense into biking and all that. I'm not even really sure how he found out about the Ironman, but then he was just swimming a lot. He was biking a lot. And then eventually he signed up for an Ironman and did it and completed it. And then he got a sick, Ironman tattoo on his calf. I remember seeing that. I'm like, that is so cool. And I used to do private sessions with him where I was just stretching him.
Yeah.
And he'd give me some chunk change on the side because he's a good uncle. And he would just tell me stories of like him, doing the triathlons and all that stuff. I'm like, man, this is really cool. But that was where it left, and I'd always had that in the back of my mind, just being like, that sounds like it's something that I want to do, but it sounds like a big commitment, and I don't know if I'm ready for that right now. So I went on through, this was prior to PT school where I'm doing this stuff with my uncle. And then as I was going through PT school, I was like realizing that there's so much more that I can do, that the Ironman is like something that I want to eventually do. I want to get to it. And my first ever triathlon was an Olympic distance. So that's like a little less than a mile and a half swim. It was a 20 and change mile bike. And then it was a 6 mile run. And It was out in Montauk. I did it with my best friend, Walter. And it was a birthday gift to each other. So we were, he just came back from the Marines at the time. He was running a whole lot. And I don't even know how we even came up with the idea, let's go do a triathlon. But we were just talking on the phone one day and he was like, I'd be down. Are you down? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And he's like, cool, let's sign up. We did it right then and there. And then we're like, okay, I guess we got to start training for this. And we just started, we weren't even together during the whole training process because we were at 2 different places. And we would swim, we would bike, we would run. And then the triathlon came up and it was awesome. Yeah. And the whole just experience itself, it wasn't a nerve-wracking thing. It was like all excitement and adrenaline, and I was just loving it. And to me, it was just like one big giant workout. Like, I'm just having fun, and we're doing this with the finish line in mind. All this training that we just did is now coming to an end, and like, how awesome are we? So we finished it together, and then we were like, every year we got to do this. And 2019 rolls around, and there's COVID. So things shut down, and we had signed up for one in 2020, and that got canceled. And then we were doing, we'd signed up for a couple Spartan races. Those got canceled too. But now, like, I got to this point where I'm like, I want to keep doing this. You know, I've really enjoyed it. And my buddy Angelo and I, my buddy Ange was in PT school with me, and we graduated, and I'm like, I want to do a triathlon. It's going to be in September. Would you be down? And it was just a sprint. So, well, I shouldn't say just a sprint, because it still is
It's still no
that's
joke.
a huge reward. Yeah, it's awesome. And that one was shorter. So it was 400-meter swim, a 10-mile bike, and a 3-mile run. And we did that together. It was his first one, and he loved it. And I'm like, you know what? I think now is the time for me. Like, I wanna do an Ironman. Like, now or never. Let me set it for next year. I'll be 30, and that'll be sick. Like, maybe I'll do one every 5 years. This is what I'm still even currently thinking, is like, if I can do one maybe every 5 years or something like that as like a milestone, then that'd be awesome. So I started training for my Ironman in before the sprint, which is in September of 2022. So I started training, I guess, in June or July. Just a lot of running and a lot of biking. And then it was still warm in the summer, so I was doing open water swims in a lake, in Lake Mayapack. And then that was kind of where it started. And then I bought a bike just off of Facebook Marketplace, a lot lighter. It was a road bike, something that would help me go fast. And I loved that. And then that's kind of where I'm at right now, is just,
So is your training you're just working on those, or you're doing auxiliary stuff too? Like, how are you programming it in your head?
Basically,
bringing that strength and component into it.
Basically, and I love to lift, so it was tough for me to kind of be like, hey, we have to put this aside, because there's a goal in mind that doesn't require you to be lifting a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky if I get like 2 days of lifting. And when I do those lifts, it's really just like a full body workout. Nothing's really that heavy. I'm taking some dumbbells and doing some squats. I just want to make sure that my body still understands the motions of it. And I'm still going through, working just muscles that I'm not really working as much when I'm doing the bikes and the runs. So throughout the week, I'm trying to do at least 3 days a week of biking and 3 days a week of running. So some of those are like a bike and a run. And then I'll be away this weekend, but once I come back, I'm going to try to look into getting into like indoor swimming, just to start that back up and get rolling. And then once that starts up, I'm going to be doing probably more so 3 days a week bike, 2 days a week run, and then 1 to 2 days a week of swimming.
Okay.
And I'll intersperse those. So I usually do, right now, it's Monday, Wednesday are big bike days. Tuesday, Thursday are run days. And then Friday is just a big workout. So I have off on Fridays, and I do a long bike ride. And long for me is like 30 miles at this point, So I'm still building up. The longest I've ever done was 50. And
okay.
I wanted to chop my legs off. But
how long did that take you?
It took me 3.5 hours.
So long to be sitting on a bike for.
It was literally a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing was, I'm doing this in Stanford on Long Ridge Road. Probably not the safest.
Yeah.
But I go and I'm 25 miles out. So anytime I go for a bike ride outside, I'm biking away, and then I turn around at a half point and I bike back. So I bike 25 miles out, and I'm kind of looking at my phone because I've got it hooked up to something for my bike, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm at. And I just so happened to like look up, and there was something. I don't know if it was a pothole or a massive rock. And I'm like, oh crap. And it was too fast for me to like move out the way.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just got to hope that my bike holds on to this. And I hit it, and I almost thought I shattered my spine, because just the reverberation that just went up my back. I was like, holy cow. And I thought that there was something messed up with the bike. So I'm like looking around. I'm like, okay, everything is intact. I'm 25 miles out, and I'm like, all right, I gotta bike back, right? So I'm biking probably like another mile or so. At this point, I had turned around, and I'm like, cool, all right, I'm okay. The bike seems to be okay, and I start biking back. I'm a mile in, and I'm like, something's just not right. It's not sounding right. The bike, it almost felt like I was biking diagonally at some points. And I'm like, what is going on? I hop off. I thought I broke the frame of the bike. So that's the first thing I look at. I'm like trying to squeeze parts of the bike, move the frame around and all that stuff. Everything's intact. I look at the chain. I'm like, that's all good. I'm looking at my wheels and I'm like, the tires. And I'm like, those look good. The wheels didn't look dented. I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm at this point 24 miles away from home. I got to bike home.
Yeah.
So I bike all the way home. My miles per hour, I was averaging around like 15 miles an hour, the first leg going out. And on the back way, I was averaging like 12. And I'm like, what is going on? Why am I going like 3 miles an hour slower? Like, I know it's not because of just muscle fatigue. Like, I feel pretty good right now. And long story short, I eventually get back. I survived. And the whole way, like, it just felt weird.
Yeah.
And I get off and I hop off the bike and I'm like, all right, let's actually take a deeper dive on this. And I'm like, no, everything looks good. And I just so happened to like grab the back of the back tire. And when I grabbed it, it just went, pfft. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I rode 25 miles back on a flat tire on the rear part of my bike. And so that was why I was going 3 miles an hour slower.
Damn.
And when I felt like I was going diagonally,
You probably were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was kind of scary to think of, but then I was like, all right, let's
that's wild, man. You could have done 100 miles then if that's the case.
Oh yeah, hey, I mean, my thighs took a beating after that.
What's the true Ironman? How long is the bike?
So it's a 2.4 mile swim. The Ironman I'm gonna do is in Maryland. So the Maryland Ironman is half of it you're swimming with the river, and then the other half you're swimming against the river. So that'll be fun. And then it's a 112 mile bike, relatively flat in Maryland, which would be nice. And then it's a marathon, and relatively flat.
That is wild. Nice.
Yeah,
that's a big feat there.
Yeah.
You know, that's gonna be really cool. What are you doing for keeping your body healthy?
Yeah, so I think my whole life has been, I want to be healthy enough so that I can like live over the weekend, right? I cherish the weekends. I, for the most part, take them off, and I have pizza. I enjoy a few drinks with some friends. I stay up late. I'll sleep in, things like that. But since last year, really just trying to like get into the motions of actual training and just staying dedicated to it, I've had to kind of take a step back and just reel in some things. So for me, I've always had a healthy diet Monday through Friday. Saturday and Sunday have been like my like binge days, so to speak, where pizza, chicken wings, buffalo wings, just all that stuff. And then I'd wake up the next day and would have a stomach ache, wouldn't feel so good. And I wouldn't want to work out, So now I've had to sort of like say to myself, first off, nobody likes to wake up and feel like crap.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
So even on days when I wasn't training, I still wasn't even liking that I was eating like crap and drinking and all that stuff. So once I had something in mind, like I had this goal of doing an Ironman, it's helped me to sort of like simmer some parts, right? Like I'm not having as many like just bad things, like processed stuff. Not that I was eating a lot of it anyways, but not trying to have a lot of pizza over the weekends and stuff like that. So generally speaking, I just try to maintain the diet that I'm currently on, but I'm adding in more like vegetables and more shakes, like protein shakes, and I have like a greens shake, so like super greens, and that's kind of like just how I have my diet laid out. I'm not a calorie counter. To me, I took a nutrition course back then and have kind of like laid out what my diet was and what like 1,000 calories looked like and so on and so forth. So I have a general idea of like, okay, if I have like this much chicken, that's going to be X amount of protein and so on and so forth. But as far as like calorie counting, how much do I actually need? I'm probably not meeting it, but at the same point, I know that I need to trim down a little bit. So as I stand, I'm right around, I fluctuate between like 172 to 178 pounds. And I think by the time I get to the Ironman, I want to be like maybe, I want to be less than 170.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I'm trying to eat more vegetables rather than put more rice on my plate or put more pasta on my plate. So at night, what I've been doing is I'm just taking those out and I'm just throwing on more vegetables versus having like a colorful plate where it was pasta, meat, and vegetables. I'm just taking the pasta out and I'm just doing vegetables. But that's only been something that I've recently done, like over the past like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's been going good too. Like I'm actually waking up kind of like not as upset stomach wise. I think I might have a little gluten thing going on. I'm not really sure, um, but you know, so just things like that.
You're stacking
and,
habits.
yeah. And I've always been good with drinking water, so I don't have that issue. But I've been trying to cut down on caffeine because I'm a huge coffee drinker, huge Celsius drinker. So I've been trimming down on that too, and we're just trying to.
What are you doing for mobility and like stretching and stuff? Is that baked in?
Yeah, so I wish I could say every day, but it's not. It's probably maybe 4 days a week where, I mean, before any workout, I'm always doing some mobility work and things like that. But I'm always just trying to do stuff for my hips. So I'll do like a 90-90 stretch for my hips. I'll do like an active hamstring stretch for my hamstrings. And I'll do like a hip flexor stretch and like open books. Just things that I know that if I'm not staying on top of it, they're going to get locked up because when I'm biking for X amount of time, my hips are only going in one direction. My hamstrings are contracting, stretching, contracting, stretching. And I'm sitting, so my hip flexors are tight. And I'm hunched over, so I'm not getting any thoracic extension or rotation. Mm-hmm. So I know that if I'm hitting those things, I'm at least going to maintain that mobility for the most part. And then those like 1 or 2 lift days that I have during the week, I'm trying to like hit the opposite motions that I'm doing. But yeah, dedicated maybe like 4 days a week of just mobility. But truthfully, I should be doing more.
Yeah.
Because there are days where I'm waking up and I feel stiff and I feel tired. But when you're doing these long runs, or long workouts, that's probably been the hardest part is like just the taking the time aspect of it. When you're spending like the 3 hours or so doing a workout, you're exhausted. You don't really feel like stretching. You don't really feel like doing mobility stuff. So I try to do that before the workout, but then obviously I still need to I gotta do something else after, whether it's like a static stretch or something like that. So, but that's the beauty of where I'm at right now. You know, like it's my first Ironman. I'm going to learn a lot throughout the training process and throughout the actual race itself. But I'm ready for it. Like, I'm here for it. I want to learn.
Yeah, I mean, that's dope. And we'll do another podcast after. But your schedule seems extremely disciplined. So to close the loop on what we were talking about before, what are your top things for mindset? You know, I know you were talking about the book, The Secret. Like, what do you do for those types of things of visualization? And how important do you think those really are for, like, your success in this and in anything, really?
Yeah. I mean, I have had these moments where I'm like, I can't believe that I'm training for an Ironman, and it gets scary, and, you know, I'm nervous about it, but I'm also really excited. And the only thing that I can think of is just crossing that line. And like, I get emotional at times, like thinking about it, like how freaking awesome is that going to be? I'm going to have family there. My girlfriend's going to be there. It's going to be awesome. Mm-hmm. And just having that is helping to like kind of push me to keep training. But yeah, I mean, trying to just find that routine of, okay, Monday and Wednesday, I got to do this. Tuesday and Thursday, I got to do this. Friday, big workout. And like, those are set in stone. And every now and then, you know, I listen to my body. I try to, at least. Yeah. If I wake up on a Wednesday and I'm like, I don't feel right. Like, I've been battling a hip flexor thing on my left side. And I'm like, you know what? Rather than try to like force myself to run on Tuesday, let me just take the day off and let me do some rehab on it. I'm trying to PT myself, which I wasn't really a big like practice as I preach type of person, but I'm going through this, and it's early enough in the stage of my like training program where I've got essentially 9 months until the race. So if I don't address this now, it's going to become a bigger issue in 9 months, and then I may not finish the race. At least if I address it now, then hopefully it won't be an issue then, and then I can finish the race. So I think for me, the biggest things have just been trying to find a routine, and the discipline part has just been like, I don't have a choice. If I'm not being responsible with my time and being responsible with like my diet and just habits, something's going to fall off, and I can't allow it to. When the race is, it's going to take a long time. I mean, I'll be doing a workout, so to speak, for 16, 17 hours, or less than 17 hours. That's
the
what we
goal.
gotta get through. Yeah. So
it's a full day.
But yeah, it's a full day. So I think I've been able to stay disciplined because I don't have a choice,
Yeah.
So
I think that's a valuable lesson. Don't give yourself a choice. I always hear people, it's like, if you want to commit to something, if you have a boat, take it to the other side and then burn the boat, right? You have no way out. That's it. You have that choice. You got to push towards it. So I think out of all that, that's like a valuable thing for sure for people to learn.
Yeah. And I mean, having the goal is the biggest thing. And here we're super goal oriented.
Yeah.
Every meeting we're talking about goals and what can we set, what do we need to change, things like that. And that in and of itself also helps, because I'm in an environment where there are goals set all around me and people are chasing their goals and trying to achieve them. And you go from that, where you spend most of your day, to then hitting like your training session. You're like, I still have a goal. I have this goal that I'm trying to get to. And so that helps. That is step number one.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way in hell I would be sitting on my butt riding a bike for 7 hours, when I get to race day, without having the goal in mind that I'm going to finish this.
For sure.
It's just not going to happen. I'm not that type of person.
Yeah, that, and then visualizing you crossing the finish line. So you're stacking these awesome things. It's like, don't give yourself a choice. Visualize the end. Create goals. Like those are valuable things that are any metric really for success, right? Like that's what I would say. And mental toughness.
Yeah.
Because that's a big part of it. You got to strengthen your mind, because comfort's easy.
Oh yeah. Well, you yourself. I mean, how's the 75 hard going?
It's going well.
Yeah.
It's day 11 or something like that.
12
or 11 or 12.
Yeah.
It's easy still.
Yeah.
I always tell people, like, the first month is all motivation. Yeah. After that, it's when the discipline kicks in and you see who's going to fail.
Yeah.
And if you do, the cool part about 75 hard is like it's a lifestyle, right? Like if I fail, I just restart the next day.
Yep.
I'm getting right back on it, and like it is a goal, so I could finish that and then feel good about myself. Like just from cleaning up my diet, waking up the right way, working out, just feel so much better mentally, physically, everything. So it's just stacking those things for me is like makes me a better person.
Yep.
In reality.
Yep.
All right, let's wrap this up. Any last closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I think if anyone is listening who is struggling, I think first off with academics, I think don't feel discouraged in thinking that community college is not a thing. It is a thing, and you'll learn a lot. If you're currently struggling through something, use me as an example. I struggled academically. I struggled from a discipline standpoint, responsibility standpoint, but here I am. I've got a great job. Love my job. I've got a doctorate now, and I'm a PT. So I love that. But I think try to find a routine that works and stay motivated on adhering to that routine. And then the discipline factor will come. The responsibility factor will come, as long as you're just staying regimented and try to learn. David Goggins is another, try to learn.
Try to learn.
But,
all right, I love that.
Yeah.
So if anyone's still listening, give us some comments. Let us know what you think. We're going to be doing more and more of these. This was a good one. You got to know JT in and out, and we're going to circle back around after the
hopefully I finish that race. That's the goal. I will finish that race.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like and share. Thanks for checking it out. Cool.